Hello everybody, and welcome to smarttag, Learn Tools for the Web. I'm your host, Chad Watkins, and today I will be guiding you through today's tool, which is Bootstrap, also known as Twitter Bootstrap. Now, what is Bootstrap? It is a front-end framework developed at Twitter, hence the name Twitter Bootstrap, and it consists of reusable components that developers can put into their websites to give it good design, to give it some good basic layout, and just make things look really good really easily. The initial release was in August 2011 and is now in version 3.0, and it has come a long way. Alright, so to get Bootstrap, go ahead and open up your favorite browser and go to getbootstrap.com, and this is where they have everything for it. So you can go ahead and click this big old download button right here to download Bootstrap, or you can use what I like to use is a CDN. I use the Bootstrap CDN a lot. Now, what exactly is a CDN? It is a content delivery network, is what it stands for, and basically it just means someone else is going to be hosting, instead of having to download the Bootstrap CSS, instead of downloading the Bootstrap JS file. They're hosting these files for you, and so you don't have to download them. They're just there for you. You just have to include this link to it. So pretty powerful CDNs. I use them quite often, especially with JSBin, which is what we're going to be using today to look at Bootstrap. So let's go ahead and take a look at the components here. We're going to look at components first, and you'll see they have a lot of stuff over here that are different components, buttons, drop-downs, and the first thing we're going to be covering is this thing called glyph icons. Now, glyph icons are all these different little shapes. They're icons, they're fonts, and they're free to use for whatever, as long as you're using Bootstrap. So you can look at all these different icons we can go ahead and use. Now, how do we use them? Pretty simple. Let's just go ahead and get rid of this right here for now. And you'll see we have this, let's get rid of the word star too. And we have this little cloud right here. Let's go ahead and make that a little bit bigger, so we can come over here. The nice thing about this is we can go ahead and modify whatever we want to do with this. So we can go ahead and say font size. Let's just make it like 30-point font. And it would also be helpful if I put there we go. Let's say 40. So you can actually see the glyph icon a little bit easier. So as you can see, we just added a span we have Twitter Bootstrap included up here, and then we have right here it says we have a class which has been given the name glyph icon -cloud. And this basically tells the span to behave like whatever icon we have decided to tell it to. So we can go ahead and say, maybe we can say tag. So instead of a cloud, we can say, get rid of the word tag, and now we have a tag right here. We can change that. We can modify things in it. The icons are there to do whatever we need to do with them. So if we need to do, like OK, so we can come in here. We have all these predefined items for us that we can just go ahead and use however we want. If I want to change the color, let's just say I want to use the color, like this nice purplish color right here. I can go ahead and just modify that in my CSS, and it becomes, I can modify things that I want to do, and I already have this pre-built component for us. And that's the glyph icon for us. So let's go ahead and add back in, we initially had a button here. And this is also another Bootstrap item where I have a button. Now without Bootstrap, let's remove it. You'll see this just becomes just a normal button right here. Like what you could see in any HTML page. So you can just add the button element. So, but if we come back here, we add that back in, we get back the glyph icon, and it gives us some default styling for this button that makes it look a little nicer. than initially it would. So to do that, all we had to do was call this class button default button extra. I actually don't think extra large is. I was playing around with that. So we can, if we want to modify it, maybe we can just say small and make that a smaller button. Or if we want, like that's still too big, we can say extra small. We can modify these however we want. We can also come in here and say button success. They have some predefined. I'd encourage you to go through the Bootstrap documentation, and you can find a lot of the different defaults that they have for us. So for these buttons, it's under CSS, and we can style these buttons with their default. So let's say we want success, or let's say we want this danger button. We don't want users clicking on it unless they know it. We want them to really notice it, so we want it to be red. So now it's danger. So and we're just giving us the class button, then defining it even further with button danger and button large. We can actually get rid of these, and it'll just give us some default. In fact, I believe actually you do need the word default right there, but we can get rid of this right here for sure. And there we are. We have a button, and the type is button default. And we can define that further with button large. So that's buttons, and that's the glyph icons for you. There's some basic stuff. Now there's lots and lots of different items here in Bootstrap. We're not going to be able to cover all of them, not even close to all of them, in today's episode. So like I said earlier, I would very much encourage you to look through the documentation and find different items here that you can explore, try using, opening up a JS bin, or JS fill, whatever you're using, CodePen, and just play around with it. Try to see what it does. So we can say send. I saw that was one, and maybe I can. So now we have a send button right there, so that we can click on, and let's make it the primary button. We want them to really send it, so it's nice blue, predefined always for us. Like I said, this is for developers who don't have good design sense, which I would encourage you to also practice as well, as that's a very important skill to have. But I'd encourage you to try it out. Alright, so let's go ahead and look at the next item that I just decided we're going to look at, and that is input groups. Now, you can stylize inputs a little bit. They have some predefined items for you for Twitter Bootstrap here, and so you can use these. We can just see, pretty simple to, just like before. It's just a matter of adding a class, just like that. So I can add this class input group add-on, and tell it what its value is going to be right here. So I'm like, okay, I want this to be, I'm always going to have 50 cents added to there. So now I have, so whenever I type this, I know, okay, I'm going to have $10.50 that I'm going to have to pay, because this dollar sign's been added to the front, and then this dollar sign's been added to the back. And this just has to do with where it is in relation to the input right here. See, this span is beforehand. We have input, and we have input afterwards. Now, one thing to note is that with the anytime you're using either just a component or just the CSS file, you actually do not need this JS file right here. We could drop it for the moment, and it would still behave exactly how we would want it to. So that's all of these right here, and that only matters, once again, with the components that we're using. So we can work components where you are using the input groups. We can use button groups, which is, I have an example right here. It's just buttons, and I can just change these. So maybe I want this to be a primary button right here. Then I want this to be a success button, and then maybe I want this one to be the danger button. So just like that, I have some basic styling I can add to these buttons groups them together, just like that. So tons of components here. We're going to be covering one last one that's in the JavaScript area. So to do that, you do need the Bootstrap JavaScript file. unlike these other ones where if you get rid of it, then they still work. Without the JavaScript files, these will cease to work. So the first thing the thing we're going to be covering with the Bootstrap JavaScript area is the carousel file. Now you've seen these all over the internet. It's just a slideshow with basic components. As I hover over here, it kind of makes darker gradient so I can tell that I'm hovered, and I can click and it'll bring me to the next slide. So I have this also set as JSPin so we can see some of the code. I just pulled some random images from Amazon that worked. These are the exact size that I needed. So as you make these bigger, you'll notice that the image, it does matter what the image is, but as I go smaller than what the image is, it is responsive. So you want to make sure your image is the minimum it's going to be, because they will readjust to the smaller sizes for you. Really useful for responsive design. Okay, so let's go ahead and go through this just a little bit. So here we are starting our carousel. Now these ones are once again the classes and the IDs that define what it is. You come over here and you can see some data attributes. I've pulled out a lot of the data attributes, but I've thrown in a couple just to show you what you can do. Now this data ride carousel attribute will go ahead and means that it's going to start the carousel, looping, automatically going from the page load. If I get rid of this, it's not going to do anything until I start clicking. Once I start clicking, then it's going to, every 5 seconds is what actually you'll notice that I have this next one set to. It's going to start after that, but not until after I'm start clicking on this. But with data ride carousel in there, it just starts looping right from the start. Now I'm sure you can guess what this data interval attribute is going to be doing. This sets how long each slide is going to be on the screen. So we can go ahead and change this. This is set in milliseconds, and so I can change this to 2 milliseconds. That's 2 seconds. So every 2 seconds now, it's changing. So another default attribute that you can see with the carousel is a pause. Its default is set to hover. We can go anytime we hover over it, it pauses that slideshow, and it stops going through the next slide until I hover off of it. Then it's going to wait 2 seconds and go on to the next one. Okay, and then we have our very basic ones right here. These are our sliders. You can see that right here they're using the glyph icons, the chevron left and the chevron right. I would encourage these ones to be used since they're the most user-friendly. The users would know what to do, but if you want to use like maybe these arrows, if you want to use the backward one, or you can come over and find the forward one somewhere in here. Forward is, let's see, it's a little bit further down. There we go. It's right there. But if you really want to, for whatever reason, if you want to use any of these glyph icons as things right here to indicate to go left or right, you can, just because we're using those glyph icons that we used earlier. So as you can see, Bootstrap is really simple to use. You can go through the documentation, figure out a lot of things on your own. I just wanted to give you a brief introduction to it and what you can do with Twitter Bootstrap. Now, you can see here that pre-built components make your development a lot faster. It's a lot of Twitter Bootstrap is already responsive for you. Now they want you to use they have a grid system that makes it easier to be able to use media queries. As you make it more responsive, you can do lots of things with your images. You can round them, give them a little basically almost like a mask right here. So I can come and do all these different things to my website very easily. So it makes it nice and responsive, very fast, just by simply adding a class. So there you have it. Once again, everyone, that's Twitter Bootstrap for you. I would encourage you to use it and stay tuned for the next episode, which we're going to be covering Sass. So please stay tuned and keep learning.